In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, Your Excellency, Sheikh Hamad bin Thamir Al Thani, Chairperson of the Board of Directors of Aljazeera Media Network, Your Excellency, Mr. Alvin Bott, Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa, Their Excellencies, the ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps, accredited to the State of Qatar, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests following us from the different Al Jazeera digital platforms, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. A year has elapsed full of major events and transformations since our last meeting here in Al Jazeera Forum. Regional powers and regimes have collapsed. Regional powers have seen their influence decline and groups have withdrawn from the scene. This is the rule of change that knows no stability, nor does it recognize any borders. In a scene which is full of contradictions, Syria has turned the page on a totalitarian regime that had ruled it for more than half a century. While Damascus was raising banners of joy, Gaza was bleeding under the weight of a war of genocide that lasted for about 14 months before a fragile ceasefire was reached. During this continuous and ongoing destruction, the world, and the Arabs in particular, stood helpless to stop the bleeding coming out of this tragedy. But in contrast to this official and popular Arab helplessness, we have witnessed an international dynamism. The people of the earth from different parts of the world stood to defend human rights, rights to life and dignity, affirming that the values of justice and solidarity know no borders. This is a legacy that is shared by all people. Today, as we examine this very complex scene, we pose a number of pivotal questions about the future of the region and the world at large. How do wars reshape the balance of power and political maps in the Middle East? What is the future of the Palestinian cause after the Battle of Al-Aqsa flood in light of the ongoing threat to displace the people of Gaza? What are the repercussions of the decline of the Iranian influence in Syria and Lebanon and the increase in influence of other regional powers on the scene? How will the political scene in Syria be shaped after the fall of the Assad regime? And what are the repercussions regionally and internationally? These questions and other questions are going to be the focus of our discussion throughout this coming 2 days, which is going to remain a platform for in-depth analysis and also a horizon in order to foresee and talk about the future. And now I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Sheikh Hamad bin Thamir Al Thani, the chairperson of the Board of Directors of Aljazeera Media Network. The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
In the name of God, the gracious and the merciful. Mr. Alvin Bortes, Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation from South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. Welcome to this forum of Al Jazeera, a new forum, the 16th forum, in which we will discuss topics that are so significant related to our region, in the Arab world and the world at large. This day last year, we met and discussed the ramifications of what was happening in Gaza, starting with the Aqsa flood and the massacres that took place after that, and we spoke directly about the ramifications which will be reflected on the region. in terms of what's happening in Gaza. And I believe that everybody is well aware of the calamities that have happened in the region and the changes, such as the change of the regime in Syria, as well as the ramifications that have been discussed by the region and faced by the region, and the challenges that we see today, starting with the attempt of displacement and the other changes in the region. All these points have been raised in your former forum, and you were right in terms of the things that were discussed and the reflections that have taken place on the region. No doubt that those challenges will also be reflected after 1 year of our last meeting, and it is expected that next year, if we survive, to see transformations in our region that will be immense, which would lead to the necessity of taking the right decisions in our region. Today we meet to discuss the developments. Just like we said, many regimes have changed, and now we are seeing the genocide that have taken place for 15 months in Gaza, and also the ceasefire that has come after that, and what happened in Syria as well. No doubt that Aljazeera channel through these months was indeed in the eye of the storm, the eye of the event. What happened in Gaza and in Lebanon and Syria, Aljazeera was there, and it was abreast of what was happening there directly, and has provided sacrifices that I am honored to mention some of those sacrifices and those who have been martyred from our colleagues in Gaza, and our martyrs in Gaza and Palestine as well, starting with Shireen Abu Aqla, Samir Abu Daqqa, and those who have been martyred after our last meeting as well. Ismail Ghul, Hamza Dahduh, Ahmed Al-Louh, and the injured Ismail Abu Umar, Wadi Al-Wahidi, Ahmed Matar, Ali Al-Attar, and our colleague Wa'il Al-Dahduh as well. Those reporters paid a heavy price through sacrificing their own life in order to cover the truth and provide it to the whole world. And also their families have paid a dear price, and that was because of their positions in terms of being steadfast in covering the events. So now we remember that and we honor that occasion, and we call for their souls to rest in peace and for healing for the wounded. In terms of the Syrian issue, Aljazeera also was clear from the beginning of the Syrian revolution, and Aljazeera has provided martyrs for this cause, and we remember our martyrs: Muhammad al-Masal al-Hurani, Muhammad al-Asfar, Dahran al-Diri, Hussein Abbas, Muhammad Qasim, Zakaria Ibrahim, Ibrahim al-Umar. All our reporters were with us from the beginning of the revolution, and they have paid a heavy price with their lives in order to take the truth and give it to the viewers in the Arab world and the whole world. And that shows the credibility of Aljazeera in its coverage of all the events, as well as what happened in Lebanon. We have covered the war in Lebanon, and our reporters were injured during their coverage of the war in Lebanon. And Aljazeera was threatened and terrorized, and now we speak also about what's happening in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Well, it is no secret that our bureau was shut and closed in the area, and the reporters were harassed even though they were doing a noble work and a noble mission, which is covering live events in the West Bank and Gaza, and to report it to the whole world. But we were surprised that they were harassed and their bureau was shut. So we stand in solidarity with them because of their unique work that they have carried out in tough circumstances. Unfortunately, not many people understand the role of the journalist in covering conflicts in terms of the credibility, yet they were met with all accusations and false accusations. So the whole world has to support this noble mission that is journalism, and to condemn genocide and the war and the killing, instead of condemning the messenger who was reporting the truth in this regard. It is no secret that the number of the journalists who have been killed worldwide, specifically in Gaza in this context, in Palestine in general. No doubt that we honor the role of the journalists, especially those covering wars and conflicts, and they are exposed to risks and they pay heavy price. Aljazeera is the most channel that has suffered this heavy price during the coverage of wars and conflicts, specifically last year. But at the end of the day, I believe this is the role of the journalist, which is to report what's happening in credibility and honesty, and dealing with the targeting of his family and himself. So this is the most precious thing for the journalist. If the journalist who knows well that he will pay this dear price and sacrifice his life, then we can never ever reward him, but suffice it to mention his name in honoring today. So what we see today in terms of images worldwide through social media and others, that shows our reporters in Gaza and their efforts, which is unique work to report the truth to the whole world. And we thank God that the impact of the work has been reflected on the whole world. We see now demonstrations in many universities. All that and others is because of the work that they do and the coverage that hasn't gone in vain. Yes, they were able to report the truth to the viewer worldwide. So we remember them in honor today, and we call for their souls to rest in peace, and for the wounded to be healed, and for the families to be patient and resolute. No doubt that in this forum today there will be many questions raised about the future, and this is your role through your participation and through deliberations in order to discuss these issues in depth. So what is happening in the world, especially in the Arab world, its reflections are seen at the Arab world and worldwide. So this is indeed an enriching topic to be discussed and deliberated upon through the sessions that will be held in this forum, and everybody will try to give a detailed vision regarding what is happening in their views and perspectives to the Arab world and the whole world. Without further ado, I wish you happy stay and welcome to all in Doha, and from Aljazeera we say peace and blessings and mercy of Allah be upon you all.
We'd like to thank His Excellency Sheikh Hamad bin Thamer for his opening speech, and now we'd like to invite to the podium His Excellency Mr. Marvin Bolse from South Africa, Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation.
His Excellency
صاحب السعادة
الشيخ
الشيخ حمد بن ثامر رئيس مجلس إدارة شبكة الجزيرة الإعلامية، أصحاب السعادة، الضيوف الكرام، أيها السيدات والسادة المشاركون الكرام، السلام عليكم. اسمحوا لي في البداية بأن أقدم لكم تحية من شعب جنوب إفريقيا، وخصوصا من سعادة رئيس جنوب إفريقيا. إنه لا شرف أن أتناول الحديث هنا من خلال هذا المنتدى لأتحدث عن طبيعة والدور المهم للسلطة الرابعة وما تلعبه السلطة الرابعة في تشكيل هذه المنظورات المشتركة فيما بيننا، خصوصا فيما يتعلق بالديناميكيات التي تتحرك سواء هنا في منطقة الشرق الأوسط أو في مناطق أخرى من العالم.
Welcome the theme of this year's forum entitled From the War in Gaza to Change in Syria, Shifting Dynamics in the Middle East. It is both timely, ladies and gentlemen, and urgent, given the major tectonic shifts within our geopolitical
والتحولات التكتونية الكبيرة التي تجري في عالمنا اليوم. أيها السيدات والسادة، نحن نتضامن وبشكل كامل مع شعب فلسطين، لأن جنوب إفريقيا لديها تجربة فريدة من نوعها كنظام وكشعب شهد آثار الإمبريالية والاستعمار. ولقد تعهدنا لنتضامن مع شعب فلسطين لأننا نحن كشعب عانى من اضطهاد بسبب الفصل العنصري، ونصرنا الذي حققناه على هذا الفصل العنصري وماكينة الأبارتايد تم ذلك تحقيقه من خلال وحدة الهدف وذلك من خلال تحقيق المصالحة. تاريخنا أيها السيدات والسادة هو الذي شكل وكان مصدر لسياستنا الخارجية، وواحدة من الأسس التي تستند إليها سياستنا الخارجية تتعلق بالتضامن الدولي أيها السيدات والسادة، وهي تتعلق كذلك بحل النزاعات السلمية والالتزام بحقوق الإنسان واحترام القانون الدولي. جنوب إفريقيا ستواصل كونها أيها السيدات والسادة دولة متضامنة مع الأشخاص والشعوب المضطهدة في مناطق مختلفة من العالم. جنوب إفريقيا أيها السيدات والسادة تضامننا يستند إلى الحقوق العالمية، كما هو الشأن بالنسبة للمجتمع الدولي الذي يدعمنا في نضالنا كما دعمنا في نضالنا ضد الفصل العنصري، كما هو الشأن بالنسبة لمن هم في منطقة الشرق الأوسط يواجهون الاضطهاد وغياب العدالة، وبشكل خاص ضد الفصل العنصري الصهيوني من قبل دولة إسرائيل، وذلك بدعم بالمقابل نجد أن هناك نضال من أجل تحقيق المصير. هذا المنتدى يضع على عاتقنا التزاما كبيرا علينا جميعا لنعمل من أجل ضمان أعلى مستوى من الوحدة فيما بيننا من أجل تحقيق الغايات فيما بين الناس وكذلك قادة الشعوب في فلسطين. ثانيا أيها السيدات والسادة، هذا المنتدى يطرح تحديات خاصة من خلال مجموعة من الدول العربية العربية في منطقة الشرق الأوسط، وذلك للتأكد من أن هناك تفاعل من أجل تحقيق أقصى مستوى من التضامن فيما بين الدول العربية من أجل تحقيق حق تقرير مصير الشعب الفلسطيني. نحن نثير هذا الأمر في جنوب إفريقيا أيها السيدات والسادة، لأن واحدة من الركائز التي استندنا إليها في تحقيق الحرية هي الدور الذي لعبته بعض الدول من أجل تحقيق الحرية. نتحدث عن دول في الواجهة، تلك الدول التي كان لها قرب إما مباشر أو قريب من النضال الذي كان يجري في جنوب إفريقيا. منتدى الجزيرة لابد أن يسعى من أجل تعميق
the understanding and the obligation
التفاهمات والالتزامات
that narrow national interests should be subordinate to the freedom of the Palestinian people. Your Excellency, Sheikh, all participants in this forum today have taken note of the decision of the South African President, President Ramaphosa, and the Cabinet of South Africa to prepare charges for the arraignment of Israel in front of the International Court of Justice, and equally so, ladies and gentlemen, for the arraignment of the head of state of the Israeli government to the International Criminal Court. We were conscious, ladies and gentlemen, that evidently, Honorable Sheikh, there will be consequences to be faced. All members, all participants have taken note of the recent decisions made by the President of the United States of America through an executive order to, in particular, ladies and gentlemen, impose certain restrictions in terms of our development health aid, citing the reason of the South African government to take Israel to the ICJ. We were conscious of that, ladies and gentlemen. But as a government of South Africa, we have said we need to be substantively principled in our approach and bear the consequences of that principality. Our message from my head of state today is that South Africa will continue to champion and deepen the work that we have done in the ICJ. Ladies and gentlemen, we will not relent. We will not relent. We will not, because of the economic difficulties that we'll experience, withdraw from the International Court of Justice. In fact, we have completed our memorial, a dossier containing the forensic evidence, and we want to in particular thank those friends of the Palestinian people and the friends of South Africa and the Middle East that furnish us, ladies and gentlemen, with some of the most important forensic evidence that we'll be able to use to deepen the consciousness of ordinary people, but also to ensure that as the jurors of the ICJ makes its decision, it will be a decision, ladies and gentlemen, that they will make based on the principles of international law and the Genocide Convention. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, there is a need for global accountability. It is for that reason, ladies and gentlemen, that South Africa, together with 8 other states, have constituted what we call the Hague Group. The Hague Group, ladies and gentlemen, is a constellation of collective action from identified states of the Global South to bring about accountability. In particular, ladies and gentlemen, part of the objectives of the Hague Group will be twofold. One, to ensure that no country that are participating and subscribing to the Hague Group will allow the docking of any Israeli ship at its port. We have seen in the past, ladies and gentlemen, that the docking of those ships has been the carrier of weaponry and enhancement of the military complex in aid of Israel against the people of Palestine. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, the members of the Hague Group will be obligated to ensure that their governments put in place restrictive measures and mechanisms legally so that no weapons, arms transfers can take place as it relates to those nations and the Israeli government. We therefore wish to make this call, ladies and gentlemen, that countries of the Middle East should join the collective effort and action of the Hague Group, as there is no member of the Arab nations that are part of the Hague Group. You have not seen any member of the European community that are part of the Hague Group. And for us to enforce accountability from the provisional measures of the ICJ, it is quite important, ladies and gentlemen, that our principal action becomes a force multiplier of our collective action. I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by making a submission that it is important that we transform global governance institutions, in particular the UNSC. You have seen, ladies and gentlemen, consistent UNSC decisions that veto the Palestine statehood recognition, notwithstanding the fact that the United Nations General Assembly on consecutive occasions have voted for the recognition of Palestine statehood. The veto power by big powers have obviously ensured that the Palestine statehood has not become a point of reality in our world. I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by once again thank you, all of you that individually and collectively, through your organizations, in participation with members of the Fourth Estate, in aiding the role that Aljazeera have played, not only in the Middle East, but in the rest of the world, to expose the hardships and the difficulty of the Palestine struggle, have been able to beam in the lounges, in the dining rooms across the world. South Africa, therefore, will continue to work and support the work of non-state actors, ladies and gentlemen, such as the Aljazeera Forum And we wish all participants well as we seek to deepen the common path towards actual self-determination of the Palestinian people, which cannot be resolved, ladies and gentlemen, by the support of any gesture or any action by any individual Middle East state as it relates to the depopulation of the Palestinian people. Thank you very much.
نشكر سعادة السيد ألفين بوتس على كلمته. الحضور الكريم، قبل أن نبدأ أعمال هذا المنتدى اسمحوا لي بالتنويه إلى النقاط التالية. تبث جلسات المنتدى مباشرة عبر شاشة الجزيرة مباشر ومنصاتنا الرقمية. خدمة الإنترنت متوفرة في هذه القاعة. للمتابعين عبر الإنترنت يمكنكم التفاعل مع جلسات المنتدى والنقاشات الجارية عبر الهاشتاج الذي يظهر
through the hashtag that you can see before you on the screen, Aljazeera Forum, the 16th edition. You can download the forum's application through both Apple and Android, the AJ Forum. So you can download this application through the use of this scanning the QR code. So we're going to have different sessions and we have also live translation into both Arabic and English, and you can listen to the translation should you wish to do so. There are headsets on both sides of the hall, and we're going to move to the first session of today, and here we have the pleasure to welcome to the podium Mr. Basim Naim, member of Hamas's Political Bureau, Mr. Hani Al-Masri, Director General of Masarat, the Palestinian Center for Policy Research and Strategic Studies. We have Riyad Mashariqa, so we'll wait for his arrival. He is chairman of the advisory board for the Palestinian Doctors' Assembly in Europe. We have Mr. Tawfiq Shuman, who is a journalist and a political researcher. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Dr. Hani. So the human suffering in Gaza continues amidst an unprecedented destruction as a result of the genocide waged by Israel on Gaza through a Western declared political and military support. The different international institutions have been crippled, unable to put an end to the war, which has enabled the occupying forces to undermine the different facilities and also this is in disparity and contradiction with the international rules and conventions. And also the ceasefire that was concluded between Israel and the resistance group, Gaza enters into a new phase. So what are the traits of this particular period or phase, and the arrangement of the post-war is going to be, and how is the Gaza Strip going to be managed, and the relationship between the Palestinian Authority and the resistance. Is the ceasefire going to become a long-term truce, and how are the Palestinians and the international community going to face the challenges of reconstruction? I would like to give you the floor, Mr. Basim Naim. So we have the sixth group that has been handed over about 20 minutes ago. So this is the first phase. Last week, there have been some concerns due to the vulnerability of this deal. So when we talk about the second phase and the third phase, particularly with regard to the post-war scenarios and reconstruction.
In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah. We send our blessings. We ask Allah to send His blessings to Prophet Muhammad. Thank you, Aljazeera, for hosting us here. Of course, the Palestinian resistance since day one, since the launch of this brutal aggression against Gaza post the 7th of October, was keen to announce its position directly to the media and to the mediators that we want to stop this aggression against our Palestinian people in order to protect our people and also to enhance what has been achieved by the 7th of October. Unfortunately, through 15 months, the Zionist enemy was procrastinating and not being committed to this agreement in order to achieve their announced goals since day one, in order to destroy the resistance, displace the people, and restoring the captives by force. However, the efforts were collected in the last few months before the signing of the agreement in order to compel this enemy to know that these three goals are unachievable, and they went to sign even though they don't like that. We are keen that this agreement to go forward, which consists of three phases. The first one, which is humanitarian for 42 days, and the second one is for 42 days, which is the period of negotiating over the soldiers and the establishment of the ceasefire permanently and reconstruction. Ceasefire, full withdrawal of the forces, and starting negotiations to rebuild. What we have seen since day one of the implementation of the phase one, that the enemy is trying to evade the conditions and the needed efforts through firing at people. Till now, 26 people have been killed, and they have delayed the return of the displaced people for 2 days for no good excuses, and they try to use every means possible to prevent the needed components which are necessary for the people to exist and to survive, such as the tents and equipment and medicine, etc. They prevented the entering of that. True, many trucks have been coming in according to the number agreed upon, but in terms of the content and the quality, there was intentional procrastination and delay, and people were going to the north or to the destroyed areas and find no chance for survival, because this was the goal of the enemy from the beginning. The destruction was in order to collectively punish the Palestinian people because they were embracing the resistance for so many years, which enabled the resistance to do what they have done in terms of the heroic actions, and also for this place to be unlivable, and thus people will not be able to have stability. Thus people will go to the south or leave if given any opportunity to leave. That's why the third point, which the enemy has not implemented until now, they did not express their desire to get involved in the second phase of the agreement. So according to the ceasefire agreement, the 16th day of the agreement, the enemy was supposed to get engaged in the second phase negotiations. Until now, and we are in day 28th, the enemy was not involved in negotiations about ceasefire for the second phase, and they tried to evade this phase. And Netanyahu announced after his return from Washington that he wants the first phase to be extended with all its conditions, with the exchange of prisoners or captives. So we as a movement are committed to this agreement, and we want it to be implemented and to do everything that entails, but we follow the commitment of the enemy. That is why we are committed as long as the enemy is committed, and this is what we have told the mediators last week when there was a crisis after the spokesman of the Al-Qassam brigades has announced that this week or today they will not be handing over of the captives unless the enemy is committed to implement his duties. So we got serious promises from the mediators that they will be committed to implement all the humanitarian commitments, and they will announce their engagement in the second phase. But until now, those delegations have not been sent. Once again, we want to give this agreement a chance to succeed, and we give all chances to do that. We try to overcome all the impediments. There are technical teams following all throughout with all the mediators and all stakeholders to implement the plan. But that takes us for certain, as you have said, to the next phase. And what is the position of Gaza in this landscape, whether post-war or in general in the Palestinian cause? Speaking about the future of Gaza dictates that we speak about two themes: the humanitarian, the rebuilding, and the political landscape. We cannot separate them both, because the destruction which has taken place is not by means of nature, but it is a human goal to punish the people of the Palestine for embracing the resistance, also paving the way to implement the plans of the far right in order to reoccupy the Gaza Strip or to displace the people. Definitely, the humanitarian and rebuilding dimension is linked in terms of managing the sector of Gaza. That's why those three sectors, those three positions, those three topics are interlinked. So we are committed with this agreement and to implement it until the last phase in order to reach a full ceasefire and a full withdrawal of the forces, because all the countries that have been contacted with in order to be engaged with the rebuilding of Gaza have confirmed that they will not be engaged in this process unless and until there is a full ceasefire and a full withdrawal of the forces. And the Zionist enemy is likely to destroy what has been rebuilt by the countries or international organizations. So now there is work that is relentless by the movement and the mediators and the Arab countries in order to put a plan to rebuild Gaza. And this is based on the fact that the agreement of the ceasefire was accompanied by a humanitarian protocol, the goal of which was to put a plan or a roadmap as to how Gaza will rebuild, and humanitarian issues and rebuilding Gaza. Based on this humanitarian agenda, we expect many, such as Arab countries, UN agencies, the European Union, and other organizations will be involved in a comprehensive rebuilding effort. And this is what Egypt is focusing on, to put a plan of 3 phases, which aims to rebuild and face the projects that aim to displace the Palestinian people and turn in the lives of the people into unlivable life in such circumstances. This plan, which is worked on today specifically from the Egyptian side in coordination with others, specifically our brother the state of Qatar, in coordination with the European Union and UN agencies. This is a plan of 3 phases that tackles about $70 billion in order to rebuild the Gaza Strip without a need for displacement, as what has been sold by President Trump in his announcement, that he used that as a pretext that for rebuilding Gaza there is a need to displace the people. But this situation definitely is linked and interrelated to a political issue, which is the management of Gaza, because Netanyahu has announced repeatedly that he will not accept a ceasefire as long as Hamas exists in the government. And he said neither Hamas nor Fatah actually will be accepted to be ruling of Gaza. For us, Hamas, since day one of the war, many times we have said that we are not keen to stay in the government, and we are ready to let go of ruling Gaza if we agree nationally on a format to build or to rule Gaza in the general context, because we consider the ruling as something parenthetical in the Palestinian context. Contrary to that, in 2014, we were in agreement to hold or give the power to the Palestinian Authority, but they did not succeed. And also, we have dismantled the National Committee and handed that over to the Palestinian Authority, but all these efforts went in vain to bring unity among the Palestinians to manage the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So we expressed a clear position to confront those schemes by Netanyahu and others to impose a new reality on the Gaza Strip, which is not a Palestinian reality, or to separate Gaza from the West Bank. We said that we always seek a national unity government to represent all Palestinians without it to be representing the different factions in terms of to be from the technocrats. And this is our first decision, which was agreed upon in Moscow and in Beijing for the first time and the second time. Unfortunately, this vision was rejected by Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, and he did not accept it as a way out from this current crisis in Gaza, or to come out of the general situation of managing the Palestinian system. And last August, our brethren from Egypt gave us a suggestion which is different, since now there is no chance for national unity and Abbas is rejecting this option. So let us go to a civilian body to manage Gaza, consisting of technocrats for a certain time, certain missions, tasks agreed upon by the Palestinians and how to be managed. So they all will take care of the affairs of Gaza, including security and civil affairs and the crossings. The movement dealt with this option positively, even though we said repeatedly through different phases of negotiations that our option is a national Palestinian unity government representing all Palestinians, managing Gaza and the West Bank, because Gaza is part and parcel of the situation in Palestine, and it's not an isolated case. And in these deliberations to form a committee, we were so flexible and positive in order to, one, this agreement will go to face the plans, and this was heard by the Egyptians, from the Egyptians, which told us there are projects to manage Gaza. So this is to confront those options and to give a consensual Palestinian position. Also give attempts to remove all the pretexts by our brothers in Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, which they were saying that this alternative will take Gaza away from the Palestinian landscape. So we accepted this committee to be formed by Palestinian independent personalities who have no relation to Hamas or any other faction. Second, to be done through a presidential decree by President Abbas, and the terms of reference will be the National Palestinian Government in Ramallah. However, unfortunately, this was rejected. So we were faced with the alternative of urgency, which we did not wish for, which is to continue to manage Gaza until we have a consensus on an alternative, because the absence of management of Hamas to Gaza today means chaos, lawlessness, and even infighting. So our presence now in the landscape is out of necessity and urgency until we have consensus, because we will not accept any alternative if it's not Palestinian and in agreement with all Palestinians. Until this moment, unfortunately, President Mahmoud Abbas and the brothers in Fatah movement reject this alternative, and they do not give an option to be instead of that. So they reject the alternative of a national government or a committee or the presence of Hamas and Qata in Gaza. But there is no other logical and acceptable alternative in the context of the Palestinian cause that's acceptable nationally. In the political landscape in general, away from the Gaza Strip, Gaza, of course, did not go in this direction since the 7th of October, except for the sake of the Palestinian cause in general. On the 7th of October in the Al-Aqsa flood, they did not go for anything except to help the Palestinian cause. So before the 7th of October, things were accepted reasonably, and Gaza announced that the goal of which is the return of the Palestinian cause to the international landscape and to help Jerusalem and the West Bank. So, in light of this revolutionary momentum by the heroic resistance and the steadfastness of our Palestinian people, we could have accumulated an exceptional momentum politically. So the presence of hijacked political system is what has turned this attempt and battle into a lame duck, and the political performance was so weak and flimsy. That is why this opportunity maybe was lost from us, because in the momentum of this battle we could have imposed a new political reality. At least there was a chance to achieve a Palestinian state within the border of 1967. There was an international momentum. 143 countries have called for recognizing Palestine as a state. However, if the Palestinian official performance was comparable to this, we could have achieved a big political purpose and build on it. You have 1 minute left. You have 1 minute left. Okay, so that's why I think the first step for us from a political point of view in Gaza, we are committed to this agreement and we want it to succeed and to overcome any impediments and to move any pretexts from the occupation forces. So we hope to reach the second phase and to announce a full ceasefire and the withdrawal of all the forces and starting the reconstruction. We are not committed to the ruling of Gaza, and we want to reach consensus to manage Gaza within the Palestinian general context. However, politically speaking, this weak political decision by the Palestinians, by a group or a person, that will make our cause very vulnerable, especially that what awaits the West Bank is even more dangerous than what awaits Gaza. The West Bank has no 7th of October, nor Hamas, no resistance, yet there is a big risk. The unity of the Palestinians is not an option, but it is a legal and religious prerogative. So we want this unity to come through, and we are keen to do that. So the last point is very important, and here we wanted to take it to Dr. Hani Al-Masri. Dr. Hani, the reflections of Al-Aqsa flood on the West Bank were so evident during the war on Gaza. Also, during the calm or the lull or the ceasefire, there was violent scenes which we have witnessed in the West Bank. In your view, how do those scenarios look in the West Bank, especially the relationship between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, politically speaking, that is?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Aljazeera Forum for giving me this very important opportunity in order to talk to this great audience. The West Bank is the forgotten victim, despite the fact that it is the most important objective when it comes to the Zionist project, because it lies at the heart of the promised land. So the heart of Judea and Samaria. So that is why that is their aim through a number of projects that they want to conclude. And when the Israeli government was formed prior to Al-Aqsa flood, they had a project and one particular point that talked about the annexation of the West Bank. And there are a number of ministers that believe in a decisive plan that Israel is able to settle and be decisive about this crisis, and that this is a historical opportunity that would give them such end. So these plans pre-exist the Aqsa flood. But what has happened after the Aqsa flood, these plans have accelerated and increased a great deal. Enough to say that the West Bank has become a place where we see different prisons separate from each other. These are scenarios that you might hear in different media outlets, but we do not know what it means on the ground. Each and every city has become a prison, even when it comes to persons that need to leave their homes every day. This has become similar to a suicidal mission. They might be those people subjected to aggression by the settlers. They can be detained, battered, and so on. All of these manifestations exist despite the fact that there are in excess of 900 crossings, and also there are so many other gates. So this is the situation. When it comes to the West Bank, it has suffered a great deal as a result of the Oslo Agreement. We can understand what is happening in the West Bank. We cannot do so unless we go back to the Oslo Agreement. So the separation of the different regions into A, B, C. This means that the security control and civilian control in certain areas, such as A zones or areas that are controlled by the PA, and also we have area and zone B, and we have the civil and security control. We're talking about in excess of 60% of the West Bank is under the control of the occupation. So these are terms that we understand, but we do not know really how it happens on the ground. So we're talking about an actual disintegration and also division of the West Bank. When we talk about Jerusalem, the situation is different altogether. Jerusalem has been annexed to Israel, and people from Jerusalem are dealt with as residents and not as native citizens. So this is the situation that we have, and this explains what is going to happen in the future. After Al-Aqsa flood, in excess of 200,000 workers have been banned from working inside Israel. From an economic perspective, this means a great loss. Those people used to bring about funds and contribute to the economy of Palestine. And we have in excess of 10,000 Palestinians who are activists and part of the different factions or independents. And we have seen the martyrdom of in excess of 1,000 martyrs, and also many agencies have been stopped. We witness ethnic cleansing taking place in the West Bank, not only now or in recent days, since the beginning of the Aqsa floods. So this is what we see. Many grazing areas have been taken from one place to another, have been stopped. So this shows the impact of Israel on different regions in the West Bank, and this has increased a great deal. Many regions are dealt with gradually as if they are part and parcel of Israel, as if this is part and parcel of Israel without any official annexation. So there is a process that tries to impose a number of racist and settler and occupation of different territories and to weaken the possibility of a unity within the West Bank. There is another problematic which is much larger than previous problems. The problem is that the PA in the West Bank believes particularly after the era of Yasser Arafat, it believes that the Palestinians can establish a state if they play a role that can lead to safety and security and stability in the region. So that is why they stayed committed to Oslo Agreement, although Israel is no longer committed to the precepts of Oslo. They say, the PA, that this is part and parcel of the interest of Palestine. They hope always that this is going to contribute for the fact that the Palestinians might have a state established, a Palestinian state. And we have seen the last attempt that was undertaken by the US in 2014 to continue and resume the negotiations. And for in excess of 10 years, we have not witnessed any political process nor any negotiations take place. And irrespective of all that, the Palestinian Authority is still committed to Oslo. When we look at the program, and this is very important indeed, they have moved from the establishment of a Palestinian state to one main objective is the PA should stay in power, should continue what it is. This has become their main objective. And they are waiting for the circumstances to change, whether through changes through new elections in Israel, to have a new government ready to have negotiations, or to have a new American administration that might be ready to resume negotiations, or wait for the international community that stands ready to impose on Israel to enter into a political process. All of this has not happened. Even worse is that the Aqsa flood, which is a great work, and it was a reaction, a legitimate reaction. But in my view, it came a little bit too early. The Palestinian situation, nor the international or Arab situation was ready for that. It was a bit premature. These are amongst the reasons that have led to lack of investment on such kind of a move. As my colleague Dr. Basim has said, the performance of the PA and the political sphere contribute to that, but the situation was not mature enough. And as a result of that, we have seen this heroic performance. We have seen a great deal of valor, courage, great achievements. But also, on the other hand, we have seen a great catastrophe. And as a result of that, we have seen situations that might be imposed, which is a situation of displacement or non-displacement. So they did bet on the failure of resistance. And this is dangerous. We have to say that. So they did bet on the defeat of resistance. So this is very dangerous indeed. When you bet that one most important or basic component of your people should be defeated, this had led to the loss of so many possibilities, so many opportunities. And despite the fact that the resistance was very resolute, this theory is still the basis upon which it is based. If the resistance fails today, it will be defeated tomorrow. And in my view, the war has not come to an end. And here I warn the resistance and the loyalists of the resistance that the war has not come to an end. So the situation has not been decided yet. So there are still many incentives that would push the occupation and the American administration to move forward and achieve the goals that have not been achieved yet. And we have to be prepared on that basis. And we see this trade-off between the Palestinians and the American administration, a trade-off between displacement, a kind of a consensus. So the head of the resistance would be part of it. And from this forum, I say that the summit should not fall into this trap, the trap that has been put, because we do not want Trump to continue with its ethnic cleansing. So this has become the topic of discussion and negotiation. That is why for Trump to let go with his project, we have to talk about the head of the resistance. They're asking for the head of the resistance. So even before a government is established, so all of those who agree should be part of it. And after that, a national unity government should be established, because to have a kind of a community support committee, this is something that leads to so many concessions. And if we accept something, they're going to call for other things until the situation ends with a surrender that none of us wants to happen.
Thank you, Dr. Hani Al-Masri. Dr. Riyad Masharqa, you were present during the war in Gaza and you had efforts in supporting the health sector, which was targeted systematically during the genocide war. Tell us about your role and your vision of the future of the participation of the Palestinians, especially the doctors. There were individual attempts and initiatives of forming committees from abroad to help support this vital sector which is necessary to stay. Thank you indeed, and thank you Aljazeera and the Aljazeera staff. I want to ask God to send blessings to the souls of those people in the health sector. 1,200 people have been martyred, and also we have some numbers, more than 48,000 martyrs, most of whom are women and children. 60%, that is, or 59.1% are children and women. The injured, more than 110,000, among them more than 21,000 severe injuries, and the rest are middle, and 12,000 handicapped, more than 14,000 lost, 212 health institutions destroyed, 36 hospitals have become dysfunctional, 191 emergency vehicles have been hit and destroyed, in addition to the sewage system, water, electricity, and schools and infrastructure which have been targeted, which affect the daily life of Palestinians. Also, there was a modern day study that was done. I talked to Al Jazeera in the past about a study that was published in The Guardian, but here we're speaking about Zaina Jamaluddin in The Lancet. A newspaper has conducted a study in which she says that the number of the martyrs is much more than that announced by the health ministry. We know the health ministry verifies and vets the numbers, but there are large numbers that did not reach the ministry. So the percentage is more than 41% of the numbers announced by the health ministry, meaning that the numbers here are more. She says more than 55,000 to 78,000 at least until June last year, not until now, but to the month of June last year. Gaza sector has witnessed a war that lasted 174 days, which has eaten up everything. All sectors of life in Gaza have been affected. But here I just want to focus on the health issue. After those numbers, everybody agrees that this is an unprecedented health catastrophe in the 21st century. So this systematic targeting from day one of the hospitals, health clinics, doctors, medical staff, the goal of it is to destroy the pillar of society, which is the health sector, and also it reaches the goal of sending people into displacement. So the destruction of the hospitals is so immense, which is the mainstay of the country. Shifa and Kamal Adwan and other hospitals were demolished and destroyed completely. I've witnessed this situation with all pain and sorrow. Last Ramadan, when the crossing of Rafah was open and things were much better than what they are now. There is sharp scarcity in the medical equipment and all the needed means of life. Medical staff do not exist. We knew that Gaza was under a 17-year siege or embargo, and then the war came to do the rest. So this scarcity was evident in the fact that the health services provided to the wounded was so weak, and the injured people would come in groups. No medical team or hospitals, even in advanced countries, to deal with this emergency situation. Most of them or all of them are children and women. This is not according to me, but all my colleagues before me and after me have said that all those coming to the hospitals were women and children with severe wounds. Also, in light of this scarcity, nobody can provide medical or health care that is suitable and comparable to this situation. Also, there was a significant side of this which many ignored, and that is Gaza consists of 2.3 million people, so there was no medical care being given to those of chronic diseases such as diabetes, blood pressure, heart diseases, kidney diseases. Throughout this period, all of those sick people with those diseases did not get any medical care, and this will duplicate the number of the fatalities and the dead people. So this is the subject of another study conducted by another Dr. Michel Gill and his colleagues in Pennsylvania, who said that the level of the ages in Gaza has been gone down, so to maybe or by 34.9%, meaning 46 has become the average lifespan. So this is understood because of people with chronic diseases and also because of the destruction of the sewage system and lack of fresh water for drinking, lack of food. All that has contributed to the spread of epidemics and diseases, which has claimed the lives of all those who remained and who were lucky to remain without injuries. I heard that from so many people in Gaza, which is the one who is martyred is the lucky one because he has gone back to his Lord, but the one who survives is the one who gets punished more because he or she cannot find food or shelter or medical care or anything. Also, if that person is lucky, he will be tasked to take care of his relatives or children. So the hospitals were so overcrowded to the max by those displaced. Not only the sick, you find the sick person with his family and maybe even neighbors in the hospital. We cannot blame people because there's no safe place. They would think that hospitals are safe, but they were not safe. They had their own share of being bombed. We can hear the shelling of the bombs. So, Doctor, you have 1 minute. Okay, in this minute, I would just like to highlight what is required internationally to face this international catastrophe. I've heard some points of view, but now we need quick response to provide medical teams to open safe crossings in order to let in the medicine and the medical equipment, maybe under the auspices of the UN and humanitarian agencies, which will guarantee that the hospitals will become functional and the field hospitals as well to face this scarcity. All studies say that now we are facing a catastrophe which is no less than the numbers of the fatality we have seen through the war. Also, the rehabilitation of hospitals and infrastructure, because many hospitals have been destroyed completely, so those hospitals need to be rebuilt and rehabilitated. Also, field hospitals need to be taken care of and supported, and to build an independent, sustainable health system through an international fund in order to guarantee the salaries of those people working in those hospitals and the medical staff, because they work for free and they were living on crumbs. Also, to establish partnership between hospitals here and outside and abroad, and also to evacuate the tough cases so that they will receive medical care abroad. Also, international monitoring to guarantee that those staff will not be directed and killed. Thank you, Dr. Mashaqba.
Mr. Tawfiq Shuman, how did the war impact and still does impact the dynamics in Lebanon and in the region? My salutations to His Excellency, the Sheikh, the representatives, Aljazeera Forum, Salma, distinguished guests. I can continue where my colleague had ended and say that this war has not come to an end, and the war might take different kinds of form, diverse manifestations in the coming phase. In actual fact, I would like to talk about the strategy of exporting crises, and this is linked to the coming dynamics in the region or a lack of a certain balance in the region. I can also say I am not with those who say that there is a new Middle Eastern system or regime that is being formed. I do think that we do need many factors that would lead to the building of this new Middle East that is being talked about for decades. I think the lack of balance and common ground between the different regional parties. And when I talk about these regional components, I talk about the Arab region and beyond. And here I talk about the two main countries, Iran and Turkey. In addition, of course, to the occupying state, Israel. All of these will not lead to having a balanced basis of political, economic, and security relations. When we talk about the strategy of crises exploitation, I would like to mention the following very quickly. So the response, which is about the day after the situation in Gaza, is linked to two main components. And after that, I'm going to move to Lebanon. And I'm going to talk also about some other crisis centers. And here I would like to talk about reconstruction, security, and the political power. And what had been presented by Donald Trump through his invitation, through his project, through his idea. I do not know if this is going to see light. This is an attempt to export crises into the Arab world, which means not to abide by the need to rebuild Gaza and also not to lead Israel to pay the price from a legal, from a financial, from a political perspectives and transform the situation to what had been called by Donald Trump those who own funds, those who have money. And here he refers to us, the Arabs. And this what it leads to the creation of a crisis between the Palestinian people in general and the Gaza Strip in particular and the Arab world. Because with the reconstruction, it is supposed to have a number of preconditions, prerequisites, political, financial, and also security prerequisites that should be met by both Tel Aviv and Washington. And this is directed directly to the Arab side in order to respond to the day after. And from this standpoint, Donald Trump started talking about this foolish idea that he talked about when he started talking about the relocation of the Gazans and transfer them to other countries in order to build an idea that can be built on in a way or another in order to respond to matters related to the day after. So the matter becomes an issue between the Palestinians and the Arabs and not between the Palestinians and the occupying state. This is one manifestation of the attempt to export the crisis to the Arab world. The second manifestation of such kind of exportation is related to Lebanon. We have seen yesterday, we have seen a protest in the streets of Lebanon. There has been a call that has been invited to by Adrai, the spokesperson of the occupying military, whereby he threatens Beirut airport. He opens the airport, he closes the airport. All of these things lead to crises in the Lebanese scene. And this is another form of exporting crises into Lebanon. The second point that I would like to talk about, there is a possibility that we might witness an incomplete withdrawal from the occupied territories, and particularly when we talk about the strategic locations, the 5 strategic locations, or strategic hills. Because the continuation of occupation would lead to a number of repercussions in Lebanon. How are the different powers going to deal with the continuation of occupation through these strategic kind of locations? Is there going to be a conflict that might arise as a result of that? This is one of the manifestations of such kind of exportation of crisis into Lebanon. In my view, and in the view of many observers, this is related to this harmonious response carried out by both Tel Aviv and Washington. We have witnessed recently the position that was expressed by Morgan Ortagus, the American envoy, when she said that there is a political and social component in Lebanon should stay out of power. So the formation of government was about to fall had not there been a kind of a divine provision that helped us form the government. This could have led to an internal explosion. In addition to that, we have seen those preconditions about reconstruction, the reconstruction of what had been destroyed by the occupying state, and the objective also is to make the process of reconstruction a long one, and this is one of the manifestations whereby we see this exportation of crisis. So we have listened and read what the Washington Post and the Foreign Affairs, and many of them, they talked about this kind of this mood that we have witnessed and has been expressed by so many countries and many newspapers. For instance, Jordan faces so many difficulties as a result of posing these ideas, living in a state of uncertainty. When they start talking about this displacement, relocation of the Palestinians in Lebanon would lead to the same uncertainty and the same issues. Even Syria, one recent article I read by an Israeli newspaper, Boaz Lieberman said, would Syria be the solution for the Palestinian refugees? Which means, would they impose certain preconditions on new Syria and whereby recognize the new administration in. And this is going to be a new imposition of the same project that was imposed in the 50s. One last point is linked to a speech that was delivered by Netanyahu in Congress, whereby he talked about the transfer of the relationship between the Arab countries and Israel from normalization into security and economic relations. And what is meant is not talking about one neighboring country. No, now they are talking about a new neighboring country, which is Turkey. So the Israelis now say that Turkey has become on our borders, and consequently we are witnessing a new Ottoman expansion. So we have fought one axis of evil, but now we're facing a new axis of evil, which is the Ottomans. Thank you very much, Mr. Tawfiq Shuman.
Thank you to all the panelists, and I apologize because we will not be able to have a Q&A session because of lack of time. The next session will be at 1 after half an hour. and then there can be a Q&A session. Thank you all for coming. Peace be upon you all.